In the last section, we set up Ingress and Nginx on our local machine. Now the last thing we have to do is create a new config file that's going to specify the different sets of routing rules that we want to use inside of our application. We're going to use the exact same routing rules that we had used back on some of our previous projects, specifically the Elastic Beanstalk one, where we set up our own custom Nginx server. So if you recall, back on that project, we had said that anytime we had some amount of incoming traffic, we looked at the path of the request. And we had said that if the request started with /API, we were going to automatically send that request off to the server. Otherwise, we would send the request off to the client, assuming that it needed to access some of the client-side resources. So we're going to set up a Ingress config file right now that's going to implement this routing rule set. So inside of my code editor, I'm going to find my K8s directory, and inside there, I'm going to make a new file called ingress service.yaml. Then inside of here, we're going to write out our config file that, as usual, is going to look very similar to a lot of the other config files we've already put together. So I'm going to specify an API version. This one is going to have a longer version on it that we've not used before. I'll say extensions v1 beta 1. The kind of object we are going to create is an ingress. We'll then set up our metadata. So we'll give it a name of ingress service. And then unlike previous metadata fields that we've set up, this one is actually going to have a couple of other metadata properties as well. So I'm going to add on a new thing to this called annotations. Annotations are essentially additional configuration options that are going to specify a little bit kind of higher level configuration around the ingress object that it gets created. So the first thing we're going to do here, we're going to add on kubernetes.io/ingress.class of nginx, like so. So this configuration rule right here is essentially telling Kubernetes that we want to create an ingress controller based on the nginx project. Then immediately after that, we're going to add in another configuration rule that's going to specifically configure how our copy of nginx behaves. So I'm going to say nginx.ingress.io/rewrite target / like so. So this additional annotation right here, again, this is going to configure how the actual copy of nginx behaves. This rule in particular says that if we end up matching a route like /API right here, after deciding to send it to the server, that configuration is going to first do a little bit of a rewrite on the request. And essentially, it's going to remove the /API part. Now, again, we did a step like this very similar back on the Elastic Beanstalk project that we put together. We had said that we probably did not want to put some configuration inside of our server that very tightly coupled it to the routing that got the request to the server in the first place. So we had decided to remove the /API out of the incoming request, just so that we did not have to write /API on every different route on the server itself. Okay, so that's exactly what this line of configuration is doing right here. So now after that, we'll unindent and we'll add in a spec. So for the spec, we're going to add a series of different rules. In our case, we're going to have just one rule. So I'm going to put in a single dash like so. And then I'll say HTTP paths. This is going to be an array as well. So I'll do a dash and I'll say path / backend is going to be service name of our client cluster IP service, which has a name of client cluster IP service, and a service port of 3000. I'll then add in another path here of /API/. I'll give it a backend as well. This is going to have a backend that points at the, where is it? Server cluster IP service right here, which has a name of server cluster IP service. And a service port of 5000. Okay, so let's talk about exactly what's happening here. Now we discussed the annotations, and then we very quickly dove into all the different rules. So our rules are saying that there are two possible paths that we can match traffic to. If someone ever comes to the path of just / by itself, or any route that looks like / followed by anything besides /API, then we want to send that request to whatever set of pods are governed by the service of client cluster IP service. And again, we just referred to the name of that other service as we had designated it inside of our client cluster IP service file. Then if a request came in with a leading route name of /API, we wanted to instead send it to the set of pods that are governed or managed by the server cluster IP service. So essentially, we're setting up the exact same relationship that you just saw in this diagram right here. The Nginx configuration that we're putting together is going to send all this incoming traffic to either the multi-client set of pods governed by this cluster IP service or the multi-server set of pods governed by this cluster IP service. We don't have to actually specify the IP address of these servers inside of our cluster. We just refer to the name of the service. And then all this Nginx Ingress stuff is going to figure it out from there. You'll notice that we also had to specify the port for both these services as well. Okay, so that's pretty much it for this config file. Now, the description that I've given you of this config file is pretty light at this point in time. Like, I haven't really told you about why we have multiple rules in here or this HTTP flag or stuff like that. We are going to actually come back to this file over time and make a couple of additions to it over time. So don't worry, we are going to come back to this file and have some further discussion about what's going on inside of here. Now, the last thing I want to do is take this file and apply it with kubectl, which should set up some networking inside of our application. So I'm going to flip on over to my terminal, and I'm going to do a kubectl apply -f, and then as usual, we'll just apply everything inside of the K8s directory. So I'm going to run that, and somewhere inside of here, we should see Ingress service created right there. So let's take a quick pause right here. When we come back to the next section, we're going to do a little bit of work to make sure that the Ingress is up and running as we would expect. So quick pause, and I'll see you in just a minute.